You're watching PEGRI TV, Rhode Island's public access channel.
Salam. My name is Sheikh Abu Hakim Abdullah, President Chairman of Al-Masjid Sharia Allah, AMSA, a non-profit religious organization operating in the state of Rhode Island, USA. I've been talking to you now for many years, many years. I've been trying to show you what you're supposed to be doing as Muslims out of the Quran and Hadiths. And I've been talking about what you're not doing as Muslims out of the Quran and Hadiths. They're both just as important. I'm not backbiting anyone. I'm telling it like it is. If you feel what I'm saying is about you, then that's your feelings. Accept it, and that's your guilt. That's your guilt that feels that way. If you did not have the guilt to feel that way, if you did not feel like that, then something's wrong with you. But you call yourself a Muslim, and you're not obeying the laws of Islam properly, and you feel like what I'm saying is against you and should not be said, then something's wrong, and you should deal with it, look into that. I want you to understand, when I left you, I was saying I was in the army. And I did my American thing. And I obeyed the laws. I put my garbage outside on Thursday. I go to vote when there's something in there to vote for me. If there's not a benefit towards me in the election, I don't see a reason to vote. I don't see a reason to vote unless it's something that's contrary to the way I live. I will not vote for the passing of marriages between two men. I will not vote for the passing of marriages between two women. I will not vote for adultery. I will not vote for killing a baby, abortions. I will not vote for these things. I will not vote for alcohol, any kind of alcohol. I will not vote for reefer being smoked in the street, medical reefer and all that. I will not vote for these things. And this is the way I feel. So I will vote for what concerns me. And I feel that everybody else should vote the same way. What is beneficial to them? Not trying to get somebody in office to satisfy the public, but trying to get somebody in office that's going to benefit them on a larger scale. And let them know it. That's something the Jews do automatically. And the Italians and everybody else do it, except we Muslims don't seem to do it. I advise you, I advise myself. Yes, I'm a registered voter. I have a passport. it ran out. It expired. I gotta get another one. And then the old one. When I went down to vote, I had it wrapped up in some garbage in my hand, and I, not thinking, I threw the whole thing of garbage in the garbage pail. I went home, and then I realized what I'd done, and I came back to the place to look for it. The garbage is all gone. And I was with some people that did not want to jump into the garbage pail to assist it. I could not jump into the garbage pail to assist it because I had this attached to me. And he wasn't going to let me jump in the garbage pail to assist it anyway. To assist it. I'm saying to you right now, I explain to you right now my so-called position of democracy in this country. The country is under the rules and regulations of the United States Constitution and the United States Bill of Rights. And it's supposed to be part Christian and part non-Christian. They picked democracy to bring the building under. Alhamdulillah. Or not alhamdulillah. This is the way I take it. I'm not trying to turn the United States into a Muslim state, Muslim government. But if it did, I would be very satisfied with that. Living underneath the laws of my way of life. Not my land, because my land is the United States. The United States I was brought up here in the United States. I believe that we Muslims are not supposed to gather that they did in Egypt. Nowhere in the world. With other people to tear down Islam in the government and to elect somebody that was going to stand for two things, Islam and democracy. You cannot do the two of them. You cannot stand for Islam and democracy at the same time. This is what I heard come out. This is what happened. The school kids in Egypt don't want a physical Islam. A lot of the business people in Egypt don't want a physical Islam. They want a spiritual Islam that guides the spiritual position of the body and not the physical condition of the body. And I'm not trying to do that. I feel that you should turn around and feel the same way as being a Muslim, a dedicated Muslim. I am a dedicated Muslim, a devout Muslim, nothing else. That's in a country that is democratic, and I'm forced to follow the democratic ways on obeying the laws and regulations in the United States. I must drive underneath the democratic laws of the United States. I must eat under the democratic laws of the United States. I must feed myself under the democratic laws of the United States. And that's what I'm doing. So I advise you to do the same thing, whatever country you're in. If your country becomes 89% Muslim, from people in your country coming to Islam, then it's for you and the people of your country to try to put it underneath Islam, the Sharia. But other than that, you can't do that. You can't, because then you become a rebeller against democracy in a democracy, in a democratic country. So I'm asking you, I'm saying to you, don't do that. Now, what they did in Egypt, to me, was not Islamic. And anybody that think it was Islamic or turn around and say that they Muslims and they did it, to me, is an acknowledged hypocrite. That's right. Acknowledged hypocrite. And going to suffer for it as being a hypocrite. We Muslims are going to have to recognize the wrath of Allah. That's one important thing we must recognize. The wrath of Allah on us. What is the wrath of Allah? How do we know there's a wrath of Allah? Does it affect Muslims? Yes, it does. Will it come on a Muslim? Yes, it do. What is the wrath of Allah? The wrath of Allah, retaliation for what we did not or did have done in our past and our present, that Allah has placed on us for what we have done and what we have did, present and past. That's the wrath of Allah. And a lot of us got it and don't even realize or don't want to accept it. Something happened during the first time it happened with the brother, with the Egyptians. They had people got up against the government. A bunch of non-believing people, Christians, Jews, and all that, got up, stood up, and said, I'm Christian, I'm so-and-so million people, and I don't agree with the president of Egypt. I want a new government. I don't want Islam to govern us. And it happened. They got rid of the president. Then they had an election, democratic election, figuring that they would get somebody in there that would turn around and put the spiritual way of Islam on them and the democratic system of the United States of the world on them at the same time. They didn't get that. This is what they did. Now, what came up was the Brotherhood that had been running around the country for years, feeding the poor, helping the poor pay bills, clothing the poor, getting hospital equipment for the poor, and everything else for the poor. Been doing this as Muslims, at the same time being a different set of Muslims. Got voted in the election and became the president of Egypt by a democratic system of voting. Not by power, but a democratic system. The majority win. The majority of people voted for an Islamic representative in Islam. And he came in trying to put what he feels is the right thing to put down on Muslims. Now, they feel that that was wrong from the beginning. The minute he got in the office, they was against him. The minute they lost the vote of him, lost him going into office, they was against him. So he came up and wanted to vote them out. They came up and started to vote them out now, again. And this is what happened. Now they turned around and they wanted to vote him out. The army didn't like it because he wanted to change the rules of the army. The army had put in their possession the control of the people, control of different things. So he turned around and made some laws against the army, putting that on them. Because the army was trying to hold a dictatorship on them, but they didn't. But the army lost that to the court. So what did the army do now? Encourage the Muslims that would stand up there, waving them flags and stuff, that they was on their side by flying over top of Egypt in army helicopters, army buses, and everything else. And they helped put the new president out of office, which was considered a coup. They don't consider it that, but it was considered a coup. The world considers it a coup. Well, that's what it was. Coup. Now they got the president locked up. Then they went without warrants and locked up 100-something of his men, the leadership that he had in office in Egypt. They locked up that group. Another violation of the rights of the people underneath the so-called democracy that they're supposed to be doing. Funny thing how those that don't want you in there can turn around and violate the laws that put you in there, even if it's their laws, because they don't want you in there. So they can turn around and make new laws. So now they got a new law. I disagree with all that, and I'm saying that as a Muslim. And the Muslims should say that. The Muslims should recognize those people out there as hypocrites. Some have even apostated. They did. Some of them walking around there, lipstick, earrings hanging down, talking about Salaam Alaikum. They did. So we must do something about that. don't know what to say to you now about this. I know what I'm saying to you. I don't know if there's going to be repercussions of me saying it from brothers and whatnot. But there's a lot of brothers, I don't care what they think, what they say. The actions of a hypocrite can be said and identified because the law says to do it. Identify the actions of a hypocrite. He did that. What they do as a hypocrite. What they would say out their mouths as a hypocrite. He did that to us. And that's what I'm doing. So I advise you to do the same thing. This is what Muslims are supposed to be doing now. If you're going to speak the Fatiha on television, speak it in reference to what's going on. You don't speak a different ayat, speak it in the reference of what's going on. We have a problem. And our Muslim brothers and sisters are not following correct Islam. But once we have a problem in how we bring them into Islam, that's another problem. I seen a program on TV. Coming out of Europe. Coming out of, I think it was France or United States, Italy, where people out in the street talking about Islam, Qurans. And they try to meet the brother in the street, and they say, well, you want to be a Muslim? They say, yeah. So put your hand up in the air, and they gave him a shahada. And they say, you're now a Muslim. That's not true. That cannot happen. The only time that can happen is if a brother's on his deathbed or he's in a war and he wanted to be a Muslim before he died. There's a procedure that a brother must go through in order to be Muslim. Yep. It's out of the Hadiths, Quran. You can just not stand up there and put your finger in the air with one brother and say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, and that's it. It doesn't work that way. There's a procedure that a brother or sister must go through in order to become a Muslim. Especially when that brother and sister is free and not a slave or not something running around the street. Free, but he's free. There's a place he must go. There's things he must do. There's a body wash he must perform. And if he doesn't perform these things, he didn't have a proper shahada. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. But yet, brothers and sisters are doing this in 2013, 2012, 2011, 2010, 2005, all the way down. This is the shahada they're giving out. And that's illegal in Islam. You cannot do something illegal in Islam and make it legal. Once it's considered illegal in Islam, that's it. It's illegal. And you got to go along with that. You got to go for that. You got to accept that. That's what you must accept, that their way. You must accept that. You can't do anything other than that. But yet we're making up our own rules and regulations. This is the so-called moderates today. They're making up their own rules and regulations. You got another brother that's talking about the imamship. To become an imam, you got to go to college for two years or more. And you can only go for so many years as imam. It's another lie. Another make-believe thing. But this is what the Muslim Student Association is saying in their books. And it's happening in some places. And we're going along with it. It's another lie. And you read the book on how to elect your imam, who is supposed to be elected for your imam, how they get elected for imam. You read that. Doesn't say anything in there about going to college for 2 years or more. Doesn't say anything that you have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree in anything. That's man's way of doing things again. It can't be accepted in Islam. Regardless to how educated Islam must become, members of Islam become, they cannot change the status of how things are done in Islam to match their educational level. It doesn't work like that. If they feel that it's a lower educated level to have just a plain ordinary shahada, that's what they stuck with, that type of shahada. The sun and the moon. So I'm showing you this. I'm saying this to you. A lot of brothers are not saying this to you. Then they go by. I see it on TV. I see it on the net constantly. I looked at it on the net for at least 45 minutes, one after another, one after another, one after another, and nobody's saying a word. Nobody went up there and told them brothers they were wrong. But yet they got away with that. And that brother hugged him and kissed him and whatnot. Told him, "You're now a Muslim." It's not true. You got many Muslims walking around out here that never followed the full procedure on becoming a Muslim. And yet they were not ill, not sick, not on a dying bed, not in the army getting ready to be killed, nothing like that. To change it. That's the reason for changing it. Those are the conditions you must be under to change it. So, my brothers and sisters, you heard from me again. I disagree with the Egypt thing. Syria, I don't know how to take Syria sometimes. Because in the outside appearance of the king and president of Syria, I didn't see no representation of Islam and none of his people. I never did.